What's up guys, Perlin here, and I am building myself a tiny house. I'm building myself a tiny house and I'm very excited about it. So in this video I just want to go over some of the reasons why I'm building a tiny house and some of the reasons that's drawn me to tiny house living and lifestyle. I'll be building my tiny house myself with my dad. We'll be building it up. I'll be documenting all of the steps along the way, and I'll be posting all of that content on this channel, Sustainable Living YouTube channel. So first of all, if you don't know what a tiny house is, it looks like this, and this, and this. It's basically a very small house with a small footprint and usually built on a trailer, so it's movable. Now, when I first stumbled upon tiny houses, it was a tiny house video on YouTube, and I watched it and I loved it, and then I found more and more and just watched 1,000 videos and was totally hooked on the idea of building it for myself, which is about 2 years ago. And since then I've been studying and researching and planning out what I'm going to build, how I'm going to build it, some of the materials I'm going to be using, and also saving money. So some of the reasons why I'm building a tiny house for myself to live in. Number one is having my own space. So ever since I left home, I've been living in shared accommodation, so just renting a room in a shared house and just going from house to house for many, many years, living that type of lifestyle. And anyone who is in a shared house can understand some of the struggles that go with that. Sometimes you're living with people that get on your nerves or have really messy habits, or maybe it's a couple and they're fighting all the time, or there's drama between different people within the house, and so it can be a struggle. For me, the kitchen is always a big one. It seems every house I've lived in, the kitchen and how messy it is and people not cleaning up after themselves is a major sort of friction area in the household. Sometimes it's the bathroom. Sometimes it's, staying up late or getting up early or making lots of noise or things like that. So being able to have my own space in a tiny house will be a massive improvement for me, because one, I'll have more space than a room that I'm renting, and I'll have it all to myself. Number two is having a space that is made for me. So again, with renting, you're kind of just at the whim of whatever place you get. So it might have a terrible kitchen, or it might have a bad shower with low water pressure, or it might not have enough hot water to support the amount of people that are living in the house. Or there might just be, really bad light or damp or just any number of things that can make your sort of everyday life irritating or annoying because you're in this house that doesn't function all that well. So with the tiny house, because I'm building it myself, it's all going to be custom. So I'll have custom bench heights, so I'm not, leaning over and arching my back every time I'm preparing food. It'll have really good natural light for making videos. It'll have a really good workspace to smash out work at home. It'll all just be made for my type of lifestyle and the things that I want in a living space. So that's another big thing that draw me to tiny house living. Now, the third reason is sustainability. So sustainability is really big priority for me, and living in a tiny house is a really good way to lower my carbon footprint. And I definitely believe in you've got to be the change you want to see in the world, or you got to walk the talk type thing. So I don't want to preach out sustainability to other people if I'm not doing it myself. And this is one way that I've discovered which will work really well for me. So my tiny house is going to be built to be extremely sustainable in terms of the materials that I use to build it, but also just in terms of the amount of resources it takes to run the house type thing. So if you've got a big house, you're going to need a lot of heating and cooling to, climate temperature that house. If it's a smaller area, you need less energy to do that. And my house is going to be all set up off-grid as well. So it's going to have solar power, battery storage, rainwater catchment, biogas, composting toilet. So it's going to be very sustainable and off the grid. I won't be using grid energy that comes from coal-fired power plants. I'll be using dramatically less water, which I'll be catching myself, and it'll all be built with sustainability in mind. It's also a great opportunity for me to film it all and document it and put it out there so other people can, one, get excited about tiny house living and how cool it can be and how fun it can be, and also the actual techniques of building and do-it-yourself renovations and stuff like that, so people can build it and reduce their carbon footprint at the same time. Now the fourth reason is it's just a very cost-effective way to own my own home, basically. So if I was to buy a normal traditional house, it would cost somewhere of like, you know, could be upwards of 500 grand, where this tiny house will cost me roughly about 50 grand. So that's a big difference. And with the tiny house being about 50 grand, I can save up and pay for that, or borrow a little amount of money to pay for that and build it out. I'll have it exactly how I want, and I won't be in a big amount of debt. Where if I've got a traditional house, I'll have to get a mortgage, I might get stuck into a job that I don't like to be able to pay off the mortgage. So it just sort of constricts you and holds you in. Also with a traditional house, because it's so much money, the majority of your sort of life wealth is tied up within that house. So if something goes bad with that house, like a recession happens or some natural disaster or some bad thing happens in your neighborhood and the value of your house and land goes down, there's not really anything you can do about that, and that's all of your wealth just draining away. Where with my tiny house, it's only 50 grand, so I've got a lot of extra money to spend on other projects or other investments, and if it does get wiped out by some type of natural disaster, it's only 50 grand that I've lost. It's not 500 grand. So that's another reason why I really like tiny houses over sort of traditional houses. But also be warned that a tiny house has very little resale value because you don't own the land that the tiny house is parked on. And that's the majority of what the value is in, is the land, not the house. Also, after it's built, it'll be cheaper to live in than, say, renting. So I just won't have to be forced to work more to bring in more money to pay more bills when there's less bills to be paid. So just having that freedom will allow me to, you know, put more time or energy into, say, different projects or hobbies that don't bring in money, but need a lot of time to do. Another reason I really like tiny houses is because I'll always have somewhere to live. So with renting, you know, they could just put up the rent, you have no control over it. You might get pushed out of certain areas or certain towns or cities because the rent's just too high. If you own a house, you could fall behind on your payments and then the bank takes it, or there could be a natural disaster which wipes out your house, and then you can be left stranded. Where with a tiny house, I can move it wherever I want. So movability is a really good thing about having a tiny house on wheels. So if there is a big fire or flood coming, I can move it to a safer place or move it out of town. I can also move if I just don't like the place anymore. If I'm in an area which I don't like, I can move. If I want to live down in Melbourne instead of up here in Byron Bay, I can do that. I can just pick up my tiny house and move along. So it's really awesome to have that type of freedom with a house that can be moved. And I'm relatively young, so I don't know exactly where I want to live for the next 20 or 40 years. So buying a house that's stuck in one spot just doesn't make sense for me at this time. And the last point is I like the challenge of building myself a tiny house. I've got a little bit of building experience, and my dad has lots of building experience, and he's going to help me build it. So just having that, experience, and dad's got a bit of land that I can build it on. He's got all the power tools, all of that. So it just makes it a little bit easier, a bit more of a attainable idea to build myself a tiny house. So those are the main reasons why I'm planning to build myself a tiny house. I'm very excited, and the build's gonna happen soon. Got my trailer organized, getting my design finalized. Good couple of weeks and I'll be starting to build a tiny house, and I'll be producing videos all about the build process, but also about, you know, the costing of everything and just tiny house ideas and sustainability ideas, and putting them all on this channel, this Sustainable Living YouTube channel. If you're interested in that and if you want to follow along on my journey, make sure to subscribe. That's it for now. Till next time, bye.